Bueno, primero quisiera comenzar por darles las gracias, agradecerles a todos ustedes. ¿No se oye? ¿Ahora? Sí. Okay. Agradecerles a todos ustedes que compartan esta noche con nosotros y esta oportunidad de conversar un poco sobre temas de la libertad. Myriam habló en inglés, Carlos Alberto en español. Yo voy a hablar en Spanglish, es lo que me queda, pero más que nada porque estoy viendo mis nietecitos aquí que no hablan español y creo que se me van a quedar dormidos. Así que voy a hablar en inglés para ver si los puedo mantener despiertos. Pero muchas gracias a todos por estar con nosotros. And I want to single out some individuals that have played a significant role in this book, starting with my wife, Lily, who was always my first reader and my first critic. She tries to get me to not use all those big words and things like that. So, and obviously my colleagues here at the Institute, Maria and Jaime and Pedro, who have always been available as a sounding board, and very especially Jennifer, who always reads all my articles and proofreads them and critiques them, and Vanessa, that did that some years ago. She was unable to be here today. And in this particular piece of work, a couple of people, Grace Pinet, who actually undertook to edit the Spanish version, Modesto Kiko Arocha, who published it. Kiko is here somewhere. And a special note to Eugenio Ñañez, who has undertaken over the years to translate all my work. My professional language is English. My Spanish remains that of a 13-year-old Pedro Pan. So I'm not as comfortable with the Spanish. So I write in English, and Eugenio not only translates, but really improves my work. So if you enjoy the Spanish version of it, the credit goes to Eugenio.
I was wondering what was happening.
And of course, the people that have published me over the years, Myriam, her colleagues in El Nuevo Herald, Andrés, Sara, those in the Pan Am Post, and also, of course, a shout out to my kids and my grandkids who are here with us today. One of the reasons that I undertook the challenge of publishing the book simultaneously in Spanish and English is because I was hoping to get as many of the Spanish versions into Cuba as possible. So if any of you at some point have an opportunity to send the books to Cuba, I would really welcome that opportunity. I just want to spend maybe 6 or 7 minutes commenting on a couple of questions. And I want to leave you with what to me is a very troubling question. And that question is, does freedom have a future? Have we, and I'm talking now worldwide, have we experienced the maximum freedom in society worldwide, and are we now in a decline? Has freedom reached its zenith, and we're now no longer becoming freer, but actually turning into authoritarian regimes? That is really a very troubling question to me, and apparently the evidence is that we are. I'll share with you some statistics. According to the Democracy Index that is published by the Economist Intelligence Unit, a very respected publication, in 2008, 14% of the world population lived in nations where civil liberties and basic political freedoms were respected and were reinforced by a political culture of democratic principles. This is 2008. 14%. Small number, but that's what it was. The latest index that just came out for 2016 reports a decline to 4.5% of the world population that today can be said to live in a full democracy. Qué triste, ¿verdad? 4.5%. So we have a phenomenon not only of a declining percentage of the world that lives in freedom, but also a very, very small number that lives in freedom. And for the first time, the United States, historically a standard bearer for democracy for the world, was demoted from a full democracy to a flawed democracy. Apparently because, according to the index, popular confidence in the functioning of government declined enormously during the 8 years of President Obama's administration. So the United States is now a flawed democracy. And to me, this sobering reality begs question as to what is the relationship between freedom and democracy, and what is the role of government, or what should be the role of government in our lives. Here's where Myriam and I will get into arguments with the minimum wage. But we often use the terms freedom and democracy interchangeably, and I would say erroneously believe that democracy somehow magically automatically produces freedom, and that somehow, thanks to democracy, government coercion, such as the minimum wage, is no longer a threat to liberty. In other words, some people would argue that government coercion is okay as long as we get to vote who is going to oppress us.
And feed us.
We tend to forget that the United States was born as a republic, not as a democracy, and that the Constitution was designed to advance liberty, not necessarily to advance democracy. The framers of the Constitution sought to protect individual rights from encroachment by government. In other words, the intent of the Constitution was to govern the government, not to govern the people. I suspect that most of us may be surprised to learn that the word democracy, for instance, was deliberately avoided by the framers of the Constitution and does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or in the Constitution. To the framers, the purpose of government was to secure for citizens the rights to life, liberty, and property. John Locke's trilogy of rights. Unfortunately, beginning with the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt, the concepts of freedom and democracy were really corrupted beyond recognition in American politics. And so was the idea of what role government should play in our lives. Roosevelt introduced what to me is a very dangerous argument. He introduced the argument that somehow freedom hinges on government. In that view of democracy, as long as government is being responsive to the people, it doesn't matter how much government restricts the freedoms. Apparently, we're still free. Today, the United States is still a democracy, but our human freedom ranking has declined to number 16 in terms of economic freedoms, and an embarrassing 28th position. I turned off my phone, but I didn't turn off my watch. So. I got to remember to do that. Number 28th position in personal freedoms. Think about that. The United States is now 16 in terms of economic freedoms and an embarrassing 28th position in terms of personal freedom. Parenthetically, Hong Kong, a territory that has never experienced democracy, ranks number 1 in economic freedoms and 19 in personal freedom.
We're just ringing all over the place.
Well, I don't know how to do this, but I'm gonna. I think I got it. We use the term freedom in political, economic, social, and religious context, but what exactly does it mean to be free? And how we answer this question, to me, is crucial, because the different conceptions of liberty entail different political ideas and different models of government. In 1819, almost 200 years ago, the Swiss-French political writer Benjamin Constant offered two rather antagonistic ideas of what it means to be free. He named them the liberty of the ancients and the liberty of the moderns. His idea of the liberty of the ancients was one which allowed citizens the right to directly influence politics through debates and votes, as was the case in ancient Greece. In other words, something akin to democracy in that sense. And by liberty of the moderns, Constant meant possession of civil liberties and having control of our own lives within the rule of law. So there is a difference. His ancient conception of freedom was centered on the collective, and his modern conception on the individual. Let us consider just for a moment the implication of these antagonistic ideas of freedom. The modern conception of liberty, a product of the Enlightenment, asserts that as individuals, we have rights that are universal. Our rights do not depend on membership in a community, and our rights most certainly do not depend on government. We are born free, and we institute governments precisely to protect our freedoms. In contrast, using this typology, the ancient conception of liberty, which is a product of the Romanticism that followed, there is no understanding of inalienable individual rights. In this vision of liberty, the common good or the collective comes first, and the people only have the freedoms that society then chooses to give to them. Thus, under that vision, government becomes the source of our freedoms. And these two conceptions of freedom are dramatically different. Whereas the thinkers of the Enlightenment viewed individual rights as supreme, the Romantics saw the freedoms of the collective as paramount, and those freedoms of the collective as being above the freedoms of the individual. I think today we can see that it is the interaction of these two conceptions of freedom that gives rise to our political conflicts as to how we should be governed. Should we have a minimum wage law or not? When democratic governance abuses majority rule and uses that majority rule as a replacement for our personal choice, individual freedom is subverted. I would argue that we have to learn not to confuse the self-government that is allowed by democratic majority rule with the self-government of our own lives. To me, the future of freedom, going back to the question at the beginning, depends on our understanding that sustained societal cooperation and economic prosperity are only possible when individual freedoms are maximized in a democratic context. In other words, the future of freedom hinges on being free from government coercion. Thank you very much.